Jasmine Crockett didn't hesitate. She didn't sidestep. She raised the issue of race, out loud, on record, and straight into the microphone. The room went still. Some nodded, others tensed. But it wasn't the topic that shook the hearing. It was what came next. Senator John Kennedy leaned forward. No snark, no smile, just one question. And in that moment, the entire room felt something shift. Like and subscribe if you believe questions matter more than noise. And tell us in the comments, what makes a question unforgettable? No one walked into that room expecting calm, but no one expected what Crockett would say either. From the very beginning, this wasn't a routine session. No handshakes, no small talk, just clipped nods and stiff folders dropping on wood. The hearing was meant to focus on federal enforcement disparities, a dry phrase masking the real powder keg: race, law, and power. The witness list had been circulated in advance. So had the rumors. Crockett's planning something. Kennedy's bringing stats. It won't stay civil. The chair opened the floor with formality. This committee convenes to discuss unequal application of federal law across communities. But even in those early words, there was tension. Senators shifted. Aides leaned in. Because no one trusted anyone to stick to the script. And they were right. Jasmine Crockett had barely touched her nameplate when she cut in. Not rudely, but with precision. Let's just be honest. This is about race, and everyone here knows it. The room didn't react at first, until it did. A rustle of papers, a soft throat clear, and a camera pivoted towards Senator Kennedy. But he didn't move. Not yet. Crockett continued, "We can't talk about enforcement without acknowledging the targeting. Communities that get over-policed, families that get underprotected, entire zip codes that live under suspicion." Some nodded, some bristled. If we're here to talk about justice, we can't skip the part where it looks different depending on your skin. Now even the chairman paused, because the speech was no longer political. It was personal. And it was clear. Crockett wasn't offering statistics. She was offering a challenge. Some of y'all will say that's not the issue, that the law is colorblind, but I've lived the difference. Kennedy still hadn't spoken, still hadn't blinked. He waited, quiet, unreadable. But Crockett, she was just getting started, and nobody in that room knew where she was about to take it. She didn't say it accidentally. She said it knowing exactly what would happen next. Crockett glanced at her notes, but she wasn't reading anymore. She was delivering. I've watched it, how y'all shift when race comes up, how the air gets heavier, how the legal jargon gets thicker, like it'll cushion the truth. A few members shifted. One sipped water he didn't need. Another tapped a pen just once, too loudly. But Crockett wasn't slowing. We got communities that don't get the benefit of the doubt. They get the benefit of the raid. Then she paused, just enough to make everyone lean in. And then it came. We are not policed the same way because we are not seen the same way. Boom, there it was. That was the sentence, the line she knew would echo, and the room knew it too. Not because it was shouted, not because it was inflammatory, but because it was undeniably direct. She looked around the dais, not for support, but for resistance, and then she said it. And I know some of y'all in this room don't believe that, but that doesn't make it less real. That just makes it more dangerous. Eyes went to Kennedy, still silent, still. Crockett wasn't finished. You want to talk about equal application of law? Then look me in the eye and tell me the numbers don't lie. She pointed to the binder in front of her. Same offenses, different zip codes, wildly different outcomes. And then she did something few expected. Senator Kennedy, can I ask you directly? The room paused. Cameras clicked into place. Staffers glanced up from their screens. But Kennedy, he didn't flinch. Of course. Crockett didn't smile. She just stared. Do you believe the justice system treats Black Americans the same as white Americans? She said it slowly, clearly. Every syllable counted, and that wasn't a question meant to be answered with numbers. It was meant to be answered with conscience. Now Kennedy had to speak. Crockett asked the question straight. Kennedy answered it without flinching, and still turned the room upside down. The silence held. For a full 2 seconds, no one moved. Then Kennedy did something that made the whole panel shift in their chairs. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't look at staff. He just looked directly at Crockett and said no. No buildup, no caveats, just one word. Crockett blinked. Once. She hadn't expected that. But Kennedy wasn't finished. No, I do not believe every American is treated equally by the justice system today. That's not new. That's not shocking. That's history. That's reality. The room shifted again, this time not in protest, but in uncertainty. But, Kennedy added, voice steady, tone sharper now. I also don't believe the people writing these systems wake up every morning thinking, how can I punish one race more than another? Now Crockett tilted her head, measuring the pivot. What I do believe in, he said, is that we built a system that rewards proximity to power, to wealth, to silence. He leaned back slightly. And sometimes, race is tied to all three. The moderator opened his mouth to interrupt, but didn't. Kennedy had everyone's attention now. What I won't believe, is that this hearing should become a blame game about skin color instead of a strategy about enforcement. Crockett raised an eyebrow. So you agree there's a problem? I do, Kennedy cut in, but I disagree on the cause. Now the gloves were off, but not the respect. It wasn't shouting, it was sparring, controlled, sharp, and suddenly much deeper than the political theater anyone expected. Kennedy pointed at her binder. You've got numbers. I've got court data too. But let me ask you something. Crockett sat back. She knew it was coming. If we agree the outcomes are unequal, what do we fix first? The law, the enforcers, or the culture behind both? It wasn't a rhetorical question. It was the reversal, the one question that gave Crockett the floor, but also raised the stakes, and that's when the hearing took a turn no one had mapped out. It wasn't yelling, it wasn't viral, it was worse for both of them. It was real. Crockett didn't answer right away. She scanned her binder again, this time not for stats, but for grounding. Kennedy had flipped the format, and now she had to flip it back. What do we fix first? She repeated. We fix who the law assumes is dangerous. Kennedy didn't blink, because you can't rewrite the rules until you change who they were built to watch. The room quieted. You want to talk culture? Crockett said. Let's talk about the stories officers tell themselves before they knock on a door. Let's talk about how a hoodie reads different in D.C. than it does in Des Moines. Kennedy leaned in slightly, but still didn't interrupt. Let's talk about who gets followed through a store, who gets asked to calm down instead of getting listened to, who walks out of a courtroom and says, that went better than I thought because they're used to it going worse. Now the tension wasn't between two parties. It was between two experiences. Kennedy responded slowly. Fair, but perception and policy aren't the same. Maybe not to you, Crockett snapped, but to the people living it, they're all one thing. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't stand. She just held the silence after every sentence like it was part of the argument. You can change laws all day long, Senator, but if the people with the badge and the gavel still see some of us as less safe, we'll never be safe. Kennedy exhaled, slow, measured. So what do? Fire every cop? Rewrite every law? Crockett didn't even blink. No, you do what you just did. You start by admitting there's a difference, and then you stop treating that truth like an insult. That one landed, not just with Kennedy, with the whole room, because for the first time, it wasn't about policy language or funding amendments. It was about acknowledgement, and sometimes that weighs heavier than any vote. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't loud, it just sat in the air, and no one knew how to answer it. Crockett had finished her point. The air had shifted. Even the senators who came to posture were quiet now, and Kennedy waited longer than expected. He tapped the table once, then leaned forward, not like a prosecutor, but like someone asking honestly. Congresswoman, when you walk into a room like this, do you walk in expecting to be dismissed? The words landed softer than the gavel, but louder than any speech. Crockett froze for half a second, not insulted, not stunned, just considering. Because the question wasn't policy, it was personal. Yes, she said, simple. No bitterness, no drama. Yes, I do. Kennedy nodded, No defensiveness, no follow-up, just acceptance. That's what we have to fix first, he said quietly. Even the moderator didn't interrupt. Because until we fix that, nothing we vote on in here matters out there. A beat, then another. Crockett let the silence hold. So let's fix it. No applause, no headlines, just two lawmakers sitting in a storm neither fully created, but both finally acknowledged. The hearing continued. Witnesses resumed, but the rest of it felt background. Because in those 2 minutes, the room stopped being a chamber. It became a mirror. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't loud, but it was the moment that got clipped and wouldn't go away. Later that night, it was everywhere. Not the headline bills, not the policy fights, just a 91-second clip. Crockett saying yes, Kennedy nodding. And that question, do you walk in expecting to be dismissed? The algorithm didn't care about partisanship, it cared about weight, and that sentence had it. The clip spread across platforms. No sound effects, no edits, just raw bare C-SPAN. The top comment on one version read, "The quietest exchange I've ever heard in Congress, and the most honest." Another, "This is what real representation looks like. Not yelling, not pandering, just finally asking the right thing." The moment traveled through morning shows, into classrooms, onto news panels that didn't know what to do with it, because it didn't fit. It wasn't a takedown. It wasn't a gaffe. It was recognition. A progressive congresswoman, a conservative senator. Both just sitting in a truth. Even satirists left it alone, because there was nothing to mock. And for once, no one edited it into a punchline. Kennedy's office didn't repost the clip. Crockett's team did, captioned only, "Sometimes a question is louder than a speech." By midweek, local papers were writing about it more than the actual bill. Pastors referenced it. Teachers used it. And suddenly the most viral moment in a polarized chamber was the one where nobody won. Nobody shouted, nobody backed down, just one question and one honest answer. It wasn't Kennedy's question that echoed, "Iwan." It was her answer long after the hearing ended, long after the cameras cut, and long after both offices moved on to other bills. That moment still lingered. Yes, that was the word. Simple, quiet, undeniable. Crockett didn't cry. She didn't pause for applause. She didn't offer an essay. She answered. And somehow that one word rewired the entire hearing. Kennedy didn't argue, didn't clarify, because there was nothing to clarify. It wasn't a matter of agreeing or disagreeing. It was about listening. And when the cameras replayed it, millions didn't hear a senator or a congresswoman. They heard a pause that felt familiar. They heard a system that had never asked the question, and finally did. Journalists tried to headline it, strategists tried to claim it, but none of them made it stick, because the audience already had. Yes, one word, a lifetime behind it, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing in a room full of laws is a truth that doesn't need them. Like and subscribe if you believe politics isn't about who talks the most, but who listens first. Tell us in the comments, what's one question you think never gets asked on Capitol Hill?